Good evening and welcome to the Obscura Institute. The lamps are lit, the archive is open, and tonight we draw a single file down from the shelves. File 5, the Max Headroom broadcast. Intrusion. Settle in, make yourself comfortable, and let us begin. Picture an ordinary Sunday evening in Chicago, the 22nd of November, 1987. The weekend is winding down, and across the city, televisions are doing what televisions did then, glowing in living rooms, holding the news, holding a rerun, holding the quiet attention of people who had nowhere in particular to be. And then, on two separate stations, hours apart, the picture goes strange. The familiar face on the screen slips away. In its place, a figure in a mask. It sways and rocks from side to side, not quite in time with anything, in front of a wall of soft static. For a few seconds, a whole city is looking at something no one put on the air on purpose. It helps to know how unusual that is. A broadcast signal is not an easy thing to interrupt. In 1987, a television station sent its program from a studio up to a transmitter, usually perched on the tallest structure it could find, and from there, out across the airwaves to everyone watching. That chain was kept safe by power, by height, by equipment most people never saw and could not have operated. To slip into it, you couldn't just flip a switch in your basement. You had to lay a stronger signal of your own over the stations, aimed precisely at the right point in the chain, at the right moment. It almost never happened. It still almost never happens. And on this night, it happened twice, on two different stations, and no one has ever been able to say for certain who did it. A short, strange visit, decades old, and still a quiet mystery. The first break came at around 14 minutes past 9 on WGN-TV, Channel 9, one of the city's biggest independent stations. The call letters stood for World's Greatest Newspaper, a nod to the Chicago Tribune that owned it. It was the middle of the 9 o'clock news. The sportscaster, Dan Roan, was on the air, running through highlights from the Bears, ordinary Sunday night sport. And then the signal simply left him. The screen went black. Not for an instant, for something close to 15 seconds, which is a long time when a live broadcast goes dark and no one in the building knows why. Then the black gave way to the figure, a person in a rubber mask, the grinning face of Max Headroom, the computer-styled television character who was everywhere that year, selling cola, fronting his own show, the supposed face of the digital future. But this was not the character. This was someone wearing a cheap copy of his face with a pair of dark sunglasses over it. The figure rocked back and forth, side to side, restless and quiet. Behind it, instead of Max Headroom's neat geometric backdrop, there was a sheet of corrugated metal, turning slowly, catching the light in a way that was clearly meant to imitate the real thing, and clearly was not. There were no words. Only static, a soft wash of buzzing noise, with nothing you could quite make out inside it. Inside WGN, the engineers did what you would hope they would do. They scrambled to work out which part of their own system had been taken from them and how to take it back. The intruder was riding in on the link that carried the station's program up to its transmitter on top of the John Hancock Center, one of the tallest buildings in the city. So the engineers changed the frequency of that link, the studio to transmitter line, the private channel between the newsroom and the tower. They moved their own signal out from under the stronger one sitting on top of it. And it worked. The figure was gone. The whole visit had lasted about 30 seconds. When Dan Roan came back, he said the only honest thing there was to say. "Well," he told his audience, "if you're wondering what's happened, so am I." A newsman, live with no idea what had just borrowed his broadcast for half a minute. For most of the people watching WGN, that was the end of it, a baffling little moment, quickly over. But whoever was behind the mask was not finished for the night. Roughly 2 hours later, around 11:20, the figure came back. This time, it chose WTTW, Channel 11, Chicago's public television station, part of the PBS network, the sort of channel showing programs late into the night for a smaller, quieter audience. That night, WTTW was airing Doctor Who, an old serial called Horror of Fang Rock from the Tom Baker years, a story set in a lonely lighthouse. A rerun drifting out across the city to whoever was still awake, and the picture cut to the mask again. This time, the station could do nothing, and the reason is almost ordinary. It's also the reason the second visit is the one people remember. WTTW's transmitter sat on top of the Sears Tower, now called the Willis Tower, the tallest building in the country at the time. The trick WGN's engineers had pulled, switching the frequency of the link up to the tower, needed a person up there, on duty, able to act. At that hour, on a Sunday night, there was no engineer at the Sears Tower transmitter to do it. The people in the WTTW control room could see what was happening. They just had no way to reach in and change it. So this time, the figure stayed. For about 90 seconds, and this time, it spoke. The audio was distorted, warped, hard to follow, and to this day, people gently disagree over the exact words. But it was no longer just static. The masked figure talked and laughed and called out and carried on a strange, lurching little performance, half a comedy routine and half something harder to name. It joked. It held things up to the camera. It rambled in fragments that did not quite join together. And then, on its own terms, it stopped. No engineer ended this one. The signal simply faded, the figure was gone, and Doctor Who came back as though nothing had reached in beside it. 90 seconds. That was all. And it has stayed in the city's memory ever since. Let's stay a while with what was actually on that second tape, because the WTTW visit is the one that was recorded clearly enough to study, and it really is an odd little document. The figure sways before the turning sheet of corrugated metal. It speaks in those broken, distorted bursts. Working from the surviving recording, people have pieced together a rough transcript. And the safest way to hold all of it is as reportedly, because the sound is poor and honest, listeners hear different things. The figure teases a Chicago sportscaster by name, Chuck Swirsky, saying, reportedly, "I think I'm better than Chuck Swirsky." It plays with the advertising of the day, shouting the Coca-Cola slogan of the era, "Catch the wave," while holding up, of all things, a can of Pepsi. A small visual joke at the expense of the brand Max Headroom was famous for selling. There are stranger lines. "Your love is fading. I still see the X. My piles." And a boast that ties the whole night together, that it had made, reportedly, a giant masterpiece for all the greatest world newspaper nerds. Greatest world newspaper being, again, what WGN's call letters stand for. So the figure on Channel 11, late at night, was still talking about Channel 9, the station it had visited first. The two intrusions were the work of the same hand, signing its own name. It hums, too, a few bars of the theme from an old cartoon called Clutch Cargo from 1959. It holds up a gloved hand or some hollowed-out object, accounts differ on exactly what, and murmurs about a brother wearing the other one, the other dirty glove. And near the end, a costumed bit, a second person in a maid outfit appears and gives Max a swat with a fly swatter, the masked figure playing it up with a yelp. And then the signal cuts. Gone. So what could investigators actually confirm here, as opposed to what viewers have wondered about ever since? The confirmed part is short and concrete. 2 stations were interrupted. The mask was a Max Headroom mask. There was a turning metal panel, a Pepsi can, a fly swatter, a second person in costume. The fragments of speech exist on tape, distorted. That is the evidence. Everything else, what the references meant, whether "I still see the X" or "my piles," was a private joke, a grievance, a clue, or just nonsense tossed at a camera by someone enjoying themselves. None of it has ever been pinned down. The performance reads like a string of inside jokes whose insiders never came forward to explain them. We have the words, but not the meaning behind them, and that gap is part of the charm of the whole thing. Set the meaning aside for a moment and look at the engineering, because this is the part that feels less like a prank and more like something carefully built. To take over these stations, the intruders made use of a particular soft spot in how television worked in 1987. Remember that chain from studio to tower? One of its links was a microwave beam, a tight, invisible signal carrying the station's program up to the transmitter on the rooftop. In those days, that beam was usually unencrypted. It was just sent in the open on a known frequency. There is a small quirk of radio physics called the capture effect. When a receiver meets 2 signals on the same frequency, it doesn't blend them or stall. It locks onto whichever one is stronger and lets the other one go. So, if you could aim your own microwave signal on exactly the right frequency at the receiver on top of that tower, and if your signal arrived stronger than the station's own, the receiver would quietly settle onto yours instead. The transmitter would then broadcast your picture to the whole city, faithfully, as if it were the station's. The station would be sending its program up at its own tower, and the tower would simply be listening to someone else. Think about what that actually takes. You need a transmitter of your own, with real power behind it, enough to outshine a professional broadcaster's signal at its own game. You need to know the exact frequency the station is using for that link. You need line of sight, a clear view toward those downtown towers, the Hancock and the Sears, with your equipment aimed precisely at the right receiver. And you need timing to be on and on target in the right seconds. This is not the work of someone idly flipping channels. It calls for genuine knowledge of radio and broadcast engineering, equipment that costs money and takes skill to run, and a bit of coordination. The second person on camera, in costume, only underlines it. Most people who understand the technology lean toward the same gentle conclusion. This points to a small, capable group, people who knew exactly what they were doing, rather than a lone prankster who got lucky. Someone among them understood the towers, the frequencies, and the capture effect well enough to use a great city's airwaves as a stage, twice, and then slip away unseen. It was, plainly, a crime, and it was treated as one. Slipping onto a licensed broadcast signal falls under federal law. The Federal Communications Commission opened an investigation. The FBI was involved. The penalties waiting for anyone caught were not small, reportedly up to $100,000 in fines and up to a year in prison. And with all of that brought to bear, no one was ever caught. No arrest, no charge, no confession that held up. The people behind the mask stepped out of the broadcast and back into the city and were never found. There was a clock running too. The statute of limitations on the offense was 5 years. It ran out in 1992. After that, even if someone had walked into a station and described the whole thing in detail, the law could no longer touch them for it. Which makes the long silence its own quiet little puzzle. There has been no legal risk in claiming the act for more than 30 years, and still no one credible has. The most talked about lead came much later, and it came not from investigators, but from the internet. In 2010, a user on the website Reddit, posting under the name BPOAG, a man named Bowie Poag, put forward a theory. He said he had known, back in the 1980s, Chicago hacking and phone phreaking scene, two brothers he thought were responsible. He did not name them publicly. He referred to them only by initials, describing one as autistic and the other as his caretaker. And he laid out why he believed they had the knowledge and the temperament to do it. For a while, this circulated as the closest thing the case had to an answer. But it is worth being careful here, because the story did not hold. The man who posted it later stepped back from it. He said he had since ruled the brothers out. The post was eventually taken down. Nothing in it was ever confirmed by investigators, and it should be treated for just what it is: unverified speculation, raised by one person and then withdrawn by that same person. It named no one the evidence could touch, and it settled nothing. So the story of the hunt is short. Two federal bodies looked. Penalties were on the table. The window for prosecution opened and closed. A single online theory rose and was taken back, and the central fact never moved. No one knows who was behind the mask. Nearly 40 years on, the file is still open, in the truest sense. There are no names that stand up. There is no confession anyone can trust. There is no clear motive beyond the act itself. No demand was made. No message decoded. No cause served that anyone has ever identified. The figure broke in, performed, teased a sportscaster, held up the wrong cola, hummed an old cartoon theme, and left. Twice. And that is the whole of what we can say for certain. What we are left with is a handful of solid things and a good deal of open space around them. We know the date. We know the two stations, WGN and WTTW, and the order and the rough times. We know the mask and the metal panel and the fly swatter. We know, roughly, how it was done, and that doing it took real skill and probably more than one person. Everything past that, the who, the why, the meaning of any single strange line, is still unknown, and may always be. There is a soft wonder in that. A major city's television, the thing in the corner of every room, was visited for a moment by someone who understood the machinery better than almost anyone watching. The mask grinned and rocked and said things that almost made sense and never quite did. And then it was gone, back through the same small gap it had come in by, leaving the screens to settle and the evening to carry on. So the night rests where it always has. A masked figure appeared on two screens in Chicago, did something most people thought couldn't be done, and was never identified. The recordings remain, gentle and grainy. The towers still stand over the lake. The city goes on, sleeping beneath them, and the small mystery drifts off into the dark, in no hurry to be solved. If you were watching Chicago television that night, we would genuinely like to hear what you remember. And if you have a theory about who could pull this off and then simply vanish, leave it below. This is one case where a stranger's memory might still matter. And that is where we leave File 5 for tonight. Thank you for spending this quiet hour in the archive. If you enjoyed this case file, a like and a subscribe genuinely help the Institute grow. And turning on notifications means the next file finds you the moment it opens. The lamps will stay lit, and the Institute will be here whenever you wish to return. Until then, rest well